We just made it so hard to get projects approved that the projects get bigger so that they only have to get approved once. And then by doing that, we fall into the trap of the iron law of mega projects by making things more and more complex, which that drives the productivity problem. And all of the crap around how you run your 6-week look ahead is just rubbish. Welcome back to the Off-Site podcast, where we talk all things construction and technology, episode 97, 3 away from the big 100. I'm Jason Lancini, calling in and dialing in from a station building in Germany. Co-host Carlos Cavallo, how you doing, mate?
Not too bad, thanks. You mentioned 100 episodes. Do you remember we had a conversation probably 2 years ago?
I'm already regretting this conversation. The theoretical one that I never had.
The vast majority of podcasts never get past, I think it was 30. So to get to the century, quite a feat.
I've not updated the stats on how many podcasts.
Yeah, our 5 listeners are absolutely buzzing.
So you're in London today. I'm in Germany. I'm doing my best impersonation of the Fat Controller, sat literally inside a station control building with a track less than 5 meters from me.
Did you look out the window when you chose the office?
I came in the back door and I didn't use Google Maps very well. So yeah.
Nice.
Nice. There was this low rumbling noise. I couldn't work out what it was until I opened the window and saw a train flying past every 3.5 minutes. Today, we are covering a quite an interesting deep dive into mega and giga projects released by Mace, the consulting and contracting company out of the UK. Super interesting dive into that. The second thing is we're going to look at this cutting edge release of new AI first browsers that probably feels like not the topic that we'd normally cover, but I think it's charting a course for things that you'll see on a construction project near you soon. And then finally, we're going to unpack very briefly at the end the latest infrastructure spending announcements out of the UK, which includes some major nuclear investments. Should we dive off into topic number 1? So the consulting division of Mace recently released a really well-structured and comprehensive report called The Future of Major Program Delivery, which dives into globally the state of and the breakdown of mega and giga projects around the world. So for some context, a mega project is a project that has a capital value of greater than $1 billion, while a giga project is a project that exceeds $10 billion in value. So these are very, very large projects and schemes. And the depth of the report is actually really remarkable. So Mace analyzed over 5,000 projects globally, shows that we now have over 11,000 live mega projects and 250 giga projects in delivery worldwide. And together that is representing more than 15 trillion in capital expenditure. That's a lot of zeros. It's a lot of zeros. There are a lot of places to dive in here. In particular of note to me was that if you compare the number of these projects since 2010, the number alone has increased approximately 3x. Sorry, it's increased by 3, so it's actually 4-fold up on the number from 2010. Lots and lots of mega and giga projects, a trend towards more and more of them. Is that because we're spending more? Is it because we're doing more of these projects in mega projects, or are things just costing more?
Do you think, when I was thinking through this, I wonder how many projects started as mega projects and finished as giga projects? Is that what's skewing the number?
Yeah, the client, you can imagine the client being really happy. Now that we've got all these great news, all these variations, we're now a mega project.
We have a big giga party. Yeah. Yeah, the numbers are actually quite shocking. Like if we think about the volume of projects here, you've got what is that? Nearly 500 mega projects in the Oz and UK, which is a relatively small population. Mm-hmm. So the volume I was actually quite shocked by, especially when you look at the 20 plus giga projects in each of those two. It's massive. One thing I was trying to think about is perception of smaller, and when I say smaller, I'm still talking hundreds of millions or £1 billion project. The perception of a small project and the perception of a giga project, does it incentivize organizations or companies to bundle up these massive schemes because it's almost more acceptable for cost overruns and inflating contract values and change and everything out the back end? And is that why we're seeing much more mega schemes than before? Because it's a bit of a license to not just print money, but spend money?
I think that there's an element of truth to this argument, right? Which is, playing back what you're saying is you can almost make a project too big to cancel.
Yeah.
And too important to cancel. But I don't know that is I don't know if that's a result or a cause of the trend.
It's like having a product and like add more features, the value is getting stronger. Then, oh my God, this thing does everything. We need it. Like we can't say that.
It's like a human nature politics thing that probably is driving this. And so there's probably an element of, I think one element is there's definitely some inflation element. If you look at the growth of these projects from 2010 to now, I think if you do a rough calculation, global inflation over the 15-year probably accounts for something like a 50% increase in prices. Now, they're citing a 3 to 4x increase in the number of these projects, so you can't really compare apples with apples there. But basically, in other words, a project that in 2010 would have been about 700-ish million is now going to be in the mega project category. That definitely doesn't account for a majority of this, 3-4-fold increase. So there's something else at play. The other theory that I would put out there is that, this is a politics-driven approach. And I think that if we think over 15 years of infrastructure procurement has progressed and the number of legislative, regulatory, and other hoops to jump through to get a project greenlit with the number of reports, stakeholder consultation, all of the steps you've got to go through before you can get a project greenlit. As the bar increases in the number of steps there that you have to go through, you can see how it encourages joining together what would have been many smaller projects into bigger projects.
We're going to run this process 5 times. Let's do it once.
Exactly. So, we talked last week about the concept of frameworks and how a lot of frameworks these days are starting to include bigger and bigger projects in there. So I think that there's an element of the front end loading of a project becoming more complicated, more stakeholders involved, that causes projects to be grouped together and become mega projects that way. And then there's probably it's probably some parallels to what we see in the US with that big, beautiful bill, right? If we can make this project big enough that gives a lot of benefit to a number of people along the route of a project, like a rail line, suddenly you can get more support for the project. Like a HS2 that went from London to Birmingham is probably at its initial concept way less popular than one that goes all the way to Manchester and Crewe.
Yeah. It's like populist politics.
So you can so you can see how the politics probably drives the outcome.
Yeah, there's definitely that as a factor. The inflation that you mentioned, I think the UK from 2010 is 64%. So that's a massive increase in cost. And that just won't be new contracts going up in value. Obviously, we've got a bunch of mega schemes that have been running for 10 years, and you can imagine that bill just spiraling each year.
Yeah, on their way to giga project status.
Yeah, exactly. Trying to hit that milestone. If we look at where the money's being spent, so there's an interesting chart that sort of maps it in a way that you can see which sectors the spend is in.
We'll put I think we should put the link to the report in the show notes because Mace have actually done a really good, big shout out to Mace here. They've done a really solid report, and not many people are pulling together this data. So a really useful resource for folks in the industry.
Yeah, for sure. There's obviously a lot of spend in resi, which we would expect. But I think the two that we've sort of touched on the theme before is obviously energy and defense seem to be quite substantial in terms of that spend alongside infrastructure, which is obviously we know that that's encouraged because it's good for the economy and everything else.
Yeah.
I'd imagine there's a big spike in energy because of if we think about the Ukraine crisis in Europe, everyone's it's kind of an accelerator to green energy. So we're less reliant on other nations and importing fossil fuels. So that makes a lot of sense. And a nice win from that is an accelerated clean energy sort of win. And then defense, like it's all over the news. Trump's trying to get every nation to commit to 5%, and they've got to spend that money somewhere and increase capabilities. So there's a huge amount of money being pumped into defense projects at the moment, which we're seeing particularly across the UK and Oz, but across Europe. So yeah, a lot of cash being spent on these schemes.
What's interesting when you look at the distribution of the same chart that you're talking about on page 12, which is this distribution of the projects by type, because this is a count of projects. Yeah, so it's the number of unique projects by each of the categories. Yeah, it's quite striking in certain regions, especially say the UK, where infrastructure is like the second smallest or third smallest of each of the categories.
Yeah, but it was by value.
By value, that's
dwarf.
right. Yeah, going back to the point of like this politics of infrastructure projects.
Yeah. High speed 2 on its own would knock out like the whole residential industry. You would expect. Yeah, for sure.
And so it's interesting to see the distribution of that vary by country. So you don't get that, for example, in the US. Here, where it's kind of roughly equal by 6 categories. So resi building, commercial, energy, institutional, and it's roughly equal. So there's like some interesting, it kind of gives you a little flavor of maybe the like political landscape or how project development happens in each country. Because Australia is, it's like flipped. Australia infrastructure is like the second largest of the categories, as an example.
Yeah. But 7th on the list, the Philippines. Quite surprised to see that above France, above Germany, above Japan. Like that was I was quite surprised to see that.
And the large majority of it is energy and utilities.
It does say at the top select countries. So yeah, I think they've taken a few as an example.
It's included. Yeah, it's a selection of countries: Saudi, UAE, Philippines, Hong Kong, India, Australia, UK, Ireland, US, Canada, Peru, and Colombia, where they could get reliable data going back to 2010.
And also just to give a sense of gigaprojects. So like everyone knows about the HS2, the high-speed rail in California, the dam that they're building in China, but there's gigaprojects in Turkey, in Qatar, in Indonesia, in Russia, in Panama, in UAE, in Turkey. So it's not just a top 5 countries spend doing the gigaprojects. It's pretty broad across all continents. So
So I guess the question to ask from that data is like this increasing prevalence of mega and giga projects. And let's say hypothetically we're right in saying that it's being driven by the increasing complexity of the front end development of a project. We also know at the same time that this iron law of mega projects is true, that like 90% of them go over budget or schedule. Is the politics, or is this like front end development that's being driven by all these other factors like how we consult and environmental factors, etc.? Are those things effectively almost dooming countries to overspend and spend more on infrastructure? And is that actually the ultimate cause of productivity in construction? And all of the other stuff that software companies claim to fix is flitting around the edges? Have we just made it so hard to get projects approved that the projects get bigger so that they only have to get approved once? And then by doing that, we fall into the trap of the iron law of mega projects by making things more and more complex, which that drives the productivity problem. And all of the crap around how you run your 6-week look ahead is just rubbish.
There's it's
asking for a friend.
If you think about who's driving that, right? So yes, you've got this exponential level of complexity with giga projects, and it's going to get harder and harder to make giga projects more productive than smaller projects, because everything from just oversight to like how you actually sort of manage and govern a project to the management team that are close enough to the set of detail that they're responsible for. But you would bet that like with any tender, there's a bunch of companies that go, that's not big enough for us. That's too small for us, or this is perfect. Are we seeing this pushed by the big consultants who run these on behalf of the clients? And they're probably behind the scenes putting together more and more and more and incentivizing or at least pushing clients to bundle these into a way that those guys are probably paid on some sort of contract size or percentage of the scheme that's being delivered. So do you think they're the ones actually saying, oh no, this is the way to go, knowing fully well that it's like a cash cow for them, rather than the actual clients thinking, oh, let's bundle these into ones? Because I'm not sure they're incentivized to, other than the approval phase with government, when they say, we'd like to spend X, let's do it once.
I think you might be overstating the power of the consultant in that regard. I think the cold hard facts of the ground are is if the process you have to go through to get a project approved, and on most very large infrastructure, energy, or whatever project it is a very large and long process that can take 10 years. Or sometimes much more. I think that the consultants and whoever are just playing within the rules of the game, and then it's also expensive. It's not only time, but it's expensive to run that process from a client, to go through the approval process. I can't remember the stats that I read the other day, but it was like shockingly expensive to get like an infrastructure scheme approved or an energy scheme. And so just the facts on the ground are probably that you try to do it once, and you try to make sure it covers all the scope that you might need to do, and you'd rather go through you'd run that race once. You're also horse trading through the process. So I don't think it's the consultants. I think it's the rules of the game.
That's not like you to have that view on consultants. Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I think another part of this, which is, I think, was apparent reading through the report, this volume that's increasing at like a factor of 3 or 4. Everyone's talking about labor shortages, material shortages, procurement issues. And when you look at the rate of growth against supposedly a contracting body of individuals who are actually working construction projects, this sort of report, you wonder whether the holistic view will actually go anywhere for people to really think about, is this even possible? Because if everyone's struggling at a scheme point of view, every government's coming out and saying, we're going to do even more infrastructure to stimulate the economy. You wonder how the capacity issue will play out too. Over and above budget issues and everything else.
The tough thing about very large projects is the thing that doesn't scale in project delivery is the bottleneck is people, like communication between people. And so as you kind of nudged at before, the moment that a single project manager can't be across the whole scope of something and you need 2 of them or 4 of them or 50 of them, there is just this inherent inefficiency in coordinating across these people and managing these people. And the bottleneck and the bandwidth limiting factor is people. There could be this argument that said if you actually just did these projects smaller at 100 million project at a time, you could do it with small teams, deliver the project, move on to the next. So it does going back to my point, which I hadn't really thought of until we started having this conversation, that like it feels like the giant problem in the whole thing is the complexity of the front end loading of projects driving bigger and bigger projects.
Yeah.
Because the way that we build software products is the smaller the project, the better. The quicker we can turn it around, get it done with a small team, the better.
Yeah. The web
and every bit of evidence, totally, and the coordinating of people and everything, and it feels like that everyone knows that, but there's this one thing that we stick at the front of the project that's like, here's the 17,000 hoops you have to jump through, and then people look at that and go, well, if I'm going to go through that, I'll go through that once, please.
Yeah, for sure. And then a delay on a normal size project is like X amount. The exponential growth of that delay on a mega project is crazy. So
correct, because you've got all these people that are not like, there's not clear there's not the same information. They don't all have the same context. Everything takes time.
Yeah. Right, I'm going to play referee here because we've got 12 minutes left and we've got 2 more topics, so we should probably be...
Okay, so doing my job. Cool. Well, let's move on because the second one's like a super quick topic that we'll cover in 2 seconds. But last shout out to Mace. Great report. I think we'll dive into more details to that report in coming episodes. Jumping topic, hard switch. We're back into AI. AI browsers. What is it? What the hell are they? Is it going to have any impact on how we deliver construction projects in the future? So to set this concept up, over the recent weeks, there have been 2 releases of AI browsers. And so what is the promise of an AI browser? we can play this video or put the link in the show notes. There's a demo from Comet of how it will work. But effectively, if you imagine you have your browser and alongside your browser, you have this chat interface, and you can ask the browser to do things, simple things like work out a route from how to get from A to B. And the chat interface will kind of interact with your browser. They use fancy words like agent, etc. But it's able to do the things that you might do right now in ChatGPT, like answer questions, have conversations, do research. But where it needs to, it can also interact with your browser or take context from your browser. So if you're watching this podcast on YouTube, it'll be able to get the whole transcript and summarize it for you to bring into the conversation. So what's the promise of this? Well, if you can provide this AI interface inside of a browser where the AI can interact with the browser as if it was the user of the browser. So Carlos is logged into Chrome, or you're probably an Internet Explorer guy, are you?
Oh, come on. The Chrome is now the old Internet Explorer.
Okay, yeah.
So I'm in that box.
The Internet Explorer crew have migrated to Chrome. So yeah, you're logged into your browser, and when you're in your browser, you're logged into all the apps you use. You're logged into your Gmail and other tools, which means that when the AI commandeers the browser to do certain things, it has all of the context that you would have on those sites. So if it needed to go and find an email, read an email, send an email, it can do it as if it is you, which gets around a common problem in trying to build these agents, which is how do we permission Carlos to see the right information? How can he take certain actions? So, I've been in monologue mode for a good amount of time. I don't know if you had any thoughts as someone that maybe who is less in the weeds and might be able to translate some of the more salient points for a listener.
That's loosely translated to Carlos isn't very good at technology, so he can
no.
construction people. Which
I know I'm on some sort of spectrum there that might not be where the broad populace is.
Yeah. It'll also be interesting. Obviously, side note, if I think Google are being forced to sell the browser because of the anti-competition thing. I wonder if that's also incentivizing people to go for it with browsers. But I think, to put it into construction language, and let's even ignore software and browsers at the moment. If we just think about a day-to-day task, which could be, you've got like a Google Sheet or an Excel document. You're in ChatGPT now going, okay, how do I run a formula that gives me this? How do I format this table in this way? Blah, blah, blah. You ask a bunch of questions, it'll give you the answers, and you'll spend time implementing those answers into your spreadsheet. The way this will go, you'll go to the browser, right, I need to take these 3 sheets, I need to combine them to this bit of a comparison. I need to add a column that shows the percentage change between these numbers. I need to do a bunch of things, and I also need to send it to my boss. Hit go, and then instead of spending the next 30 to 40 minutes actioning the bit of information that you have, the browser will go and do your job. And while it's doing that, you could be doing other things, and it's going to do it like 50 times quicker than you could. So the productivity unlock is massive. When you combine that with let's think of day-to-day things you might do in software construction, like form filling, document control, communication to raise certain formal communications to the client, it will be able to go in and do the clicking, the typing, and the thing that really takes time.
Yeah, that spreadsheet and that setup is a really good example of the 2 different ways to solve that problem. And so let's say you've got a spreadsheet, or you've got some form you need to fill out. And at the moment, you'll go and ask questions about how I do something in a spreadsheet, maybe on Google, maybe on ChatGPT, then you go do it. If AI can go and do that for you, there's 2 ways it could kind of do it. One is it could be embedded inside of the spreadsheet application in the web or on the desktop, like a Microsoft Copilot is. The problem then is it doesn't have the context of any other browser tab that you have open. And many times when you're doing a spreadsheet, or you're filling some form, or raising an RFI, you have context that's in some other system that's usually in another tab of your browser that you kind of need to translate across.
Yeah. And the reality is, if you're in ChatGPT, you're giving it information. You're then, here's an RFI form, and here's the spreadsheet with some data, Correct. And here's all the stuff that you need to do your job. That's gone.
And so imagine you could go into into your browser and say, open a new RFI, on top of the, to basically ask the question in the email from Bill, and it can go and find your email, navigate the browser, find the email, translate that into the form, open the form, etc. So it can, by being embedded in the browser, it can not only be embedded in the tool that you're trying to do something in, but it can navigate that like you, without that tool even needing to be AI native or compatible. The tool doesn't need to change at all. The browser's doing all the work.
Yeah.
Plus, it can steal context from other tabs in your browser.
Yeah. Just to make a bit of a bet, do you think the tier 2, tier 3 will be the first to adopt? Because it's way easier to adopt the tool probably in terms of like rules, regulations, and internal governance. But they're probably the least connected, so the gain is bigger. What tier 3s have a bunch of APIs between tools when they can just use this and keep their old methods but increase their productivity?
Do you mean like tier 2, tier 3 contractors?
Yeah. If we just think about the context of construction and who would be first to use.
I think the consumer is going to lead the enterprise. Yeah, I think like people are just going to bring this into work. You already see it right now, right? People go home and do all their work on ChatGPT and then come back in and plug that in. Well, it's what's happening, right? People, if the company blocks ChatGPT or the company blocks AI tool, people are like not dumb. Why spend 4 hours?
Like, fucking hell, these early warnings are getting heavy.
It's like it's the equivalent of like, I don't know. It's the equivalent of like someone has invented a bloody like car or a tractor, and they like park it up in the field and be like, we can't use that. You got to do it with a horse and a mule or whatever. People are not dumb. They go home, do the work on AI, and then come, or they have their own laptop that they pop out.
Students are doing it, adults are doing it.
Yeah, 100%. So I think it'll be the consumer leading the enterprise here.
Yeah, I just remembering back to my days on construction sites where you couldn't even go onto YouTube. They blocked in the browser, so like, because it is browser based, it's harder to go home and run the search to get the answer. Like it needs to be in your day to day. So that's probably the limiting factor of people just sort of starting with it.
Yeah, you've got to install a piece of software, which that's even harder than going to
and you need
some
systems
website.
that are cloud based, so like planners will love it.
And that probably leads to like, what does that mean for the tools that might exist in the construction workflow at the moment? Well, if this AI enabled browser becomes the way, then you theoretically don't need anything done to the tool that you might be using in order to leverage that capability. So you could be using a terribly old P6 or something, P6 being desktop, but like a web-based tool.
And it's a real lifeline for shit applications because it's going to
things
keep
that are
you in the mix
embedded.
longer.
Yeah, totally. I think that there's a very strong argument that says that this browser-based, this AI-enabled browser basically just removes the need for any fancy SaaS, and you could just orchestrate everything through this like browser level, and it doesn't matter what the user experience of the end application is or the system of record is at all. The flip side is, I don't know whether your take on that, whether you would agree with that as the premise.
Yeah, I think I do agree. I don't think it's going to be much too early. So I think we get excited about this and the potential, but yeah, if we just look at the pace of change in some of these, like some projects just take a year to approve, like simple applications that are standalone, isolated, and secure. So yeah, there's going to be a bit of time here, but I definitely think there'll be a combination because it can feed information into applications which aren't great and have poor UI. It can do that well, but it can also, if there are tools that are integrated with APIs and that's pulling information, then you could have a combination of both and the project's still getting what they want, which is the connected set of data behind. So I think it'll be kind of a bit of a messy middle for the short term. Yeah, on the basis that they can even get these browsers approved. It's so early from what we're seeing. We don't really know how contractors will even react to the idea of it, and the security and everything comes out the back end.
Yeah, that's true. The counter argument to this is that the idea of navigating the UI is inherently like lossy or like flaky it can get stuck, not know where to go next. The UIs update, it'll navigate as though it's a person to a degree. And so
it will make mistakes like a person too.
Yeah. So it's like flaky, and it's probably also quite slow.
Yeah.
So the other way to tackle this problem is through APIs where, computers talk to computers. And there is this framework called the Model Context Protocol, or MCP, which is a framework created by one of the AI model providers, which is a framework in which an AI model can understand and interact with an API effectively, which is much more direct, much more controlled in the action that it's taking. So basically, instead of going to your browser and say, create an RFI, find the window, put the info in, create the RFI, it just calls this API and calls the create RFI endpoint, passes in the information it needs, and it does it. It's much quicker, much more stable, and reliable.
And it can ask questions if there's anything missing and things like that.
Yeah. And so that's the alternative approach, but it does mean that the tools that you want to take the actions in need to be this MCP API enabled connected platform, which it means it's the counter outcome for your legacy tools. So, the argument is if the AI browser thing is like the magic bullet, then legacy tools have a lifeline. But if actually they just kind of plateau out as slow, flaky, especially when you're taking complicated actions in complicated interfaces, it could be that actually that doesn't get you very far, and you need to be using tools that have clear APIs, MCP enabled, etc. So takeaway, this AI browser is a thing that you'll hear more about. You're probably not using it today. I guess
most people on Internet Explorer probably right now.
I'll predict in a year most people will be doing some version of it.
Most people at work or at home?
Both, because I reckon Chrome will ship it.
Yeah, okay.
It's a big threat to Google. Google have to ship it.
Yeah.
Internet Explorer won't, because they stopped updating. It's been deprecated. So
they got Copilot, which is awesome, right?
Yeah. Anyway, we forget about Edge. I know we're like mega short on time.
Yeah, shall I rattle to topic 3 quickly?
Yeah, do it. Take
so the final note is if anyone has been tracking online the news around projects over the last couple of weeks, or follow recruiters on LinkedIn, you'll see there's a whole bunch of schemes that have been greenlit in terms of funding from the government. So we got Sizewell C, everyone knows about that one. That's all approved, going ahead, something like 20 to 40 billion worth of work, 10,000 jobs. We got the A66, massive contract up in the north, big highway scheme. It's split into 3 sections, which is run by Kier, Orios, which is the old Kelbray, and Balfour. We've got the M54, M6 projects, which is BAM. They've been waiting for a long time to get that approved, a couple $100 million. The Midlands Rail Hub is a couple of billion, or between 1 and 2 billion. It's about connecting the Midland region. It's a hub in Birmingham I think it connects 50 stations across the Midlands. That actually has been awarded, but it's in the calling period at the moment, so it's not public information. And then there's other schemes across the country in terms of highways and rail projects. So billions being released. So we'll see them all coming online over the next sort of 6 to 12 months.
Great.
Good.
Nailed it. Did you say Orios is the new Kelbray?
The actual delivery side of Kelbray broke away, and that's called Orios. So It got bought out by a PE firm or a big conglomerate. So Orios is the new Kelbray. It's a lesser-known Netflix series. Right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into today's show. If you did enjoy the episode, please do think about liking the video or following us on your chosen podcast platform. We really appreciate your support, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye-bye.